Hey guys, Mike here from Mercado Airwaves. We want to thank you so much for all the support you've given us here on the network. And if you want to see what we're up to outside of the station, please follow us all over social media. I'm on Twitter at MikeMmedia and on Instagram at Mike Mercado Media. You can follow the good brother Alex Mercado on Twitter at Mercado21Alex and on Instagram at Mercado2121. The lovely Nicole Mancha is on all social media platforms at Typing When Tipsy. You can follow the network on Twitter at Mercado Airwaves. Our pop culture show, The Good Brothers, on Twitter at Good Brothers Pod. Our true crime shows on Instagram at Murder, Mysteries, and More. And of course, like us on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. You can see all our videos on YouTube.com/Mike Mercado 2333 or by searching Mercado Airwaves Network. We play video games on Twitch, twitch.tv/Mercado Airwaves Network. And of course, you can support our network by finding a tier just for you, whether you want early access, you want to be part of polls, you want to win contest prizes, by visiting us at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. And we really appreciate it wherever you get your favorite podcast. So like, rate, review, and share us. And please spread the word. For the good brother, Alex Mercado, for the lovely Nicole Mancha, I'm Mike Mercado. Thank you so much for all the support you've given us here on the network.
Welcome back to the best damn pop culture podcast in the Midwest, in Illinois, in Chicago, in the United States, in the universe, the multiverse, like the good brother says, the Spider-Verse, even in quarantine. Welcome in to the Good Brothers Quarantine Files. I'm your host, Mike Mercado, joined by the good brother himself, the one and only Alex Mercado. What's up, good brother?
Some say the best brother. How's it going?
I don't know who's telling you those lies, but they definitely deserve the money that you are paying them to tell you those things.
It's not that much money, to be honest.
And we have a lot of fun here on the Good Brothers Quarantine Files. We are trying to keep you each company as we all go through this tough time together during this coronavirus, aka COVID-19 pandemic. Hopefully you guys are all doing your part. Hopefully you guys are all safe and sound, and hopefully the good brother and I are able to keep you company. If you missed the first episode of the Quarantine Files, the good brother and I ranked our favorite live action 30-minute sitcom. It was a really fun episode, good brother, for a debut.
No, yeah, it was super fun. We got to talk about like two hot takes in there about the Fresh Prince and about Friends. But luckily, I came out with the two top shows, so I'm happy.
Well, one of these days, good brother, I'm going to make you do a job for me, and when it does, it will be glorious, and the fans will turn on you like they always have been. But until we get to that moment, good brother, we got another list for the awesome fans of Mercado Airwaves, the Good Brothers Quarantine Files. What do we have on dock today?
Right now, we have Best Adult Animated 30-Minute Sitcom. What we decided to do was, because splitting anime would have been too much, so we're going to do an animated section eventually. We're also going to do a more Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, Disney-based section with more childhood, teenage animation stuff. But we decided there was plenty to here to do the adult animated stuff, which would be stuff you saw on Fox at Night, Cartoon Network, any of those sort of Adult Swim styles, instead of just when we were kids. So this was stuff maybe you weren't supposed to be watching at a young age, and you still watch as an adult.
So, good brother, one of the things that I found interesting doing this list specifically was where do places, and I guess it goes by to each their own discretion, is something like, and I can tell you because they're not on our list right now, so maybe a spoiler for this specific episode, but maybe it'll come down in a different episode. Where does something like Beavis and Butthead, Rocko's Modern Life, and like Ren and Stimpy fall into something like this? Would it be considered adult animation, or is that almost the edge of kid animation?
You know, that's a really good point, Mike. And I think the way I decided to split it up, like, look at those three shows in particular. Ren and Stimpy split time between Nickelodeon and Spike TV. So that one, I guess, if it made a list, it would be okay. And then you have a show like Beavis and Butthead was kind of the originator. I definitely think that's more of an adult show, even though MTV kind of splits the vote a little bit. And then with Rocko, I would consider that just a very mature Nickelodeon show. So when we get to that list, shows like that, Adventure Time, Angry Beavers, you might have to have that conversation of maybe that's why it was funny as an adult still, but it was a show made for children on a children's network. So that's kind of how we decided to split it up a little.
Very good. So we're going to have a lot of fun lists. We could do MTV lists. We could do animation lists, 15-minute lists, because Robot Chicken, Celebrity Deathmatch. There's a lot of stuff that we could do in the animation world, just like we could do in the rest of pop culture. So I'm super excited. But this list, I felt like, good brother, that you and I were pretty much on the same wavelength. Our rankings are a little bit different. Do you think this might be the easiest one that we're going to do in the entire Quarantine Files?
Yes, for two reasons. One, I think we grew up on a lot of these shows together. Considered the other one was more when I was in college, you were in college, so we split up a little bit for the adult ones. I think this one we definitely grew up like teenagers, so we're a little more similar. And it's funny that the two shows that are not similar were shows we both were more into as adults than children.
Very good. Well, since Good Brother, the last episode was a lot of fun and we had good mojo going, why don't we do what we did last time? And I will go ahead and start it off, and you will be the one that finishes off this episode. So, are you ready to rock and roll, Good Brother, and see what we rank as our top 5 animated sitcoms?
Let's do it.
All right, number 5, Good Brother, is a show that I love. I unabashedly considered myself that one of the main characters was a pseudo version of me in all its manners and in his morals, and I think it's one of the most creative shows that comes from one of the most creative minds that we have in animations. Matt Groening himself, Futurama. There's not much I could say about this show when somebody like myself and somebody like the lovely Nicole Mancha could both love this show and never really talk about it until we both realized that it was one of our favorites. It had so much heart. It was funny. It was so smart. I think Futurama is the reason why a lot of these shows on this list, except for probably number 1, was able to be so smart. So to me, Futurama comes in as my number 5, top 5 animated sitcoms.
Yeah, Futurama's great. I think, I'll be honest, there's a lot, like Fresh Prince, there's a lot more miss than hit. I think sometimes they're either trying to be way too smart or too simple, and they never really found that middle until a couple sweet spots in the middle episodes. Once they kept getting canceled and re-brought back up and went to Comedy Central, I thought they hit another peak. Mm-hmm. But overall, I think there's a lot of dullness in that show. But one thing I do agree with, it set up a lot of shows. I think Adventure Times and Rick and Morty's and a lot of shows like that definitely are a product of Futurama, where you can have that really, really good writing, and and the animation's kind of the backdrop.
And I think this one, and you know what, you do bring up a good point, and when we're nitpicking these top lists, because Futurama is an all-timer, these are Hall of Fame shows that we always bring up, but to me, one of the things Futurama does is it does do something that most animated shorts can't do, and that is really pull at the heartstrings, and not in a gimmicky way. Some of the episodes that have to do with Fry's brother, obviously the dog episode, the mom episode, there are Leela's parents. There are a lot of episodes that just organically really do bring out all the human emotion, and that is something that Futurama did so well, and for me, that's why it lands at number 5. But with that in mind, Good Brother, what did you have at your number 5 slot?
Well, just to finish off the Futurama, because it didn't make my list, I think the argument I have with you is, I can name 10 really good episodes, and then it's a lot of filler. And I think the episodes you just named are like, well, yeah, like everyone names those, compared to better written shows, I think, that will make our top 3 that are like, no, every episode has that almost, or at least 20 seasons worth of that. Compared to Futurama, we're out of what, like 9 seasons? You have, again, 10 really, really memorable, heart-filled, game-changing episodes. It didn't make my list, and that's why it didn't. But again, all these 6 shows, because out of our 10 picks, there's 6 shows, it's definitely a Hall of Fame. It was my honorable mention.
Yeah, and I think Futurama, I think Futurama really, where it's, and I could understand where you're coming from, but I guess maybe it is after so many viewings, seeing like an episode like The Monkey and the hat that makes him smart, and like being creative, like they do hit a lot of messages that, you know, we're ahead of its time. You got to remember, this show came out in the late 90s, and it was never believed. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fandom saw it come and go, and seeing a lot of people not believe it, even though the fandom is so strong. But it's interesting. So I want to hear, what do you have at number 5?
My number 5 is going to be different than yours, but it's going to make your list. My number 5 was King of the Hill. And the reason I love King of the Hill so much is, one, there is a lot of heart, but honestly, it's not even meant for the heart. It's just the humor and the look of Texas. And you know me, I went to school in Texas, and you think the show is kind of like, oh, this isn't real, but it is. And I love the way they shoot Texas as the main character of Texas is a whole different world, and it's so fascinating the way they do things, especially being from Illinois. It's fascinating, and I think it's hilarious. King of the Hill is just, it created so many characters, and I love to see like this modern memes and these gifs kind of relaunch it up. Like, it kind of was dead for a while. It was kind of the underdog show after Futurama, after The Simpsons. And to see it kind of alive again, and all these fun little people are just finding out about it, is really cool. I think it's very underrated. I think it's the most underrated, because it does tackle a lot of normal middle-class American issues. And it does it real nicely. And, like, I love, like, out of all the shows we watch, Hank Hill has probably been the most consistent character without becoming a parody of himself. And I think that's super important when it comes to any show.
I could not have said it any better myself. I do have this a little later onto my list, so I'll get into some of the reasons why it was so impactful for me. But before I even forget it, I just want to kind of mention it as a little point, a little cherry on the top of your great point is, to me, it was the modern day version at its time of All in the Family. It was the closest you could get to making that type of series where you were dealing with middle class problems. There were exaggerated problems, but at the same time, at the root of it all, Mike Judge was trying to put a spotlight in a certain type of lifestyle, and I think he did a great job of doing that. So I commend you of having King of the Hill. To be honest, like I thought it would be a little bit higher on your list, but to know that you and I were on the same wavelength of where we put King of the Hill, that being your number 5, I think it's a great spot.
No, yeah, I agree. And obviously some of these shows, since we have them out of order, we'll kind of have a discussion real quick, and then when we get to it later, we might skip by it a little faster because, again, after Futurama, we have all the same shows.
And another show that you and I have on our list, but in different places, I at number 4 have Rick and Morty. So coming off of Futurama, Rick and Morty is obviously the modern day version, which is crazy to say, of Futurama. It's obviously a little bit more raunchy. And it probably is a better version, but coming off of a better version, saying that though, it's like, yeah, you had the benefit of being a better car because you've had 40 years of that manufacturer fine-tuning it and doing it better. You know, Futurama was the basis of it. We've had tons of shows that have tried to do what Futurama did, and it only took Rick and Morty taking some of Futurama, but also taking stuff from different pop culture like Back to the Future and having its own spirit to it. I think Rick and Morty could easily have been said is a parody of something like Futurama. I don't think so. I think it surpassed that, it being in the same genre, and Rick and Morty became its own thing. It may be in the vein. Over time, you could root it back through like 23andMe, but this isn't like a direct descendant. This is something that matured into its own thing. Rick and Morty, again, talk about being smart, talk about being provocative. Talk about making you think. Talk about making you morally question things. It's a show that is ahead of its time while we're living in it right now. Rick and Morty, to me, number 4.
We're going to have to push this combo because I'll be honest, the argument's not going to be, is Rick and Morty great? Because we both agree all these shows are great. The argument's going to be, for me, why Rick and Morty is the best animated sitcom ever to exist.
And we'll get to that in just a little bit second. But before we get to that, what did you have at number 4, good brother?
So my number 4 ended up, falling a little more than I ever thought it would. And I think it's because the modern seasons haven't been the best, but still really good, is South Park. What's funny about South Park is South Park was something we discovered through our Theo Martine's tape collection that he had of these. And when he went away, quote unquote, Jeff got them and he let us watch them at a really young age.
Do you remember what episode it was?
It was Stan's Gate Off.
Yep.
Big A out.
Yep.
Big A out in his entrance. So, like, really old school South Park, right? When it was still really just inappropriate before it became kind of like goofy inappropriate. You kind of get what I mean? Like, it was more Beavis and Butthead style of like, this is just offensive and funny. And now it's kind of become goofy, and it's still very good. It's still very funny. Again, all these shows, A+, Hall of Famers. But to me, it drops a little because, again, it's starting to, I liked it better when it wasn't serialized. And I know there's fans out there of the Randy stories and like the continuation. I personally liked it better when it was just show season. And maybe you get 2 carryovers, but now it's very much season arcs. And I don't love, because I don't think they do season arcs very well. I think they do, like, I like their Game of Thrones. I like their Adventureland thing, where they can do series of episodes, but when they try to run the whole season, I think we start seeing some weaknesses in the writing. But again, it's a great show. It was one of the very first things we saw as children, good or bad, but it fell to number 4 for me.
I absolutely adore South Park, and you'll see why and where I put it on my list. But I think, going to your point, it all falls in line on who's in that writing room at that given time and how Matt and Trey are feeling and what other projects they're working on. When they're in their top tier, ready to rock and roll and just mow down society, nobody touches South Park. Nobody. But we'll get to that in just a little bit, good brother. So to kind of round it out of where we're at right now here in our top 5 animated sitcoms here on Quarantine Files on The Good Brothers with Mike Mercado and Alex Mercado. At number 5, I have Futurama. The Good Brother has King of the Hill. At number 4, I have Rick and Morty. The Good Brother Alex has South Park. And at number 3, good brother, I have one that you had in the beginning of your list. I have King of the Hill. And this one, strictly for me, beyond the All in the Family connection and how it's the only show that is real. It's the only real show on this list. There was no gimmick. There was no, little twist. It was a show about a family in Texas living through America at this time. And it was almost the idiocracy of America. But at this point, living in 2020, you're kind of like, King of the Hill kind of got it right in the way people were. Everything was kind of exaggerated. Everything was almost to the extreme. And I think Hank Hill never did become a character of himself. Even the propane thing, even the damn it boy, or like Bobby, or like it never became a parody. It was just him. I think the closest thing that show got to a gimmick was Peggy. I think Peggy was probably the gimmick, but even in her, it was that idea of a strong suburban mom who thought she was going to take over the world.
That's a normal Texan mom with all of these careers and all these ambitions. And at the end of the day, she starts off as more of a stay-at-home mom, substitute teacher, and she broads into real estate and owning her own businesses and restaurants. And to me, I think that's funny because that really is a definition of a Texas wife.
Absolutely. And then the way Hank interacts with that, and the way like Luann is introduced, because it's not just the immediate family, but it's the extended family and the neighborhood and high school friends. Like, you don't need to just be in Texas to know what it is to not just, like, you ask a lot of people who live in like Iowa or these different places that want to go to the big city. Most people in Texas like staying in Texas. Most people in Chicago like staying in Chicago, so on and so forth. And there's something about going to high school with your best friends and like one of your friends going to the military, and like they really did get middle America right. So for me, at number 3, King of the Hill. What do you have, good brother?
Yeah, fantastic show. Fantastic. Cotton Hill legend.
Total legend. At number 3, good brother, I know you have a show that is probably the newest on this list, but it's one that critically you've been speaking highly of. I'm afraid to emotionally get into. What do you have at number 3?
Well, what I have here is critically, the second best show, technically. I think the best way to describe BoJack Horseman, my number 3 pick, is the director said it best. This show would be a total drama on HBO, but they put animals as the main characters to make it a comedy. And I want you to think very Seinfeld, Curb Your Enthusiasm, mixed with a This Is Us, where it tackles a lot of real problems, not in the real world, because, again, this is Hollywood, animals. Like, it's not meant to tackle that, but tackle more depression, anxiety, feelings of worth, feelings of your job. And I think it handles it so well. And being a young adult, being like, I really don't know what I'm doing. Am I a good person? Does me doing good things make me good? Or does me feeling, it just tackles a lot of things that I think people our age are going through of who am I, and what defines me. I think it's the best written show. When it comes to pure just point from the beginning episode to the end of the episode, it's the best written. Again, critically, it's number 2 out of all these shows. And it's just a beautiful show. My only thing is, it's animals. It takes a little bit used to. There are some subplots that don't really add up, but the character that Lauren did with BoJack is legendary. And again, it's the most modern, and it's on this list for that reason. It tackles issues the other shows really don't tackle as much and as serious.
And it goes to show that it doesn't matter necessarily the way the art is made, but when great artistry is behind it, you're talking about great voice acting, you're talking about great writing, you're talking about a show that found its way into pop culture and without necessarily being like a Rick and Morty where everybody ended up watching it. It's something that not everybody has binge watched. And some people who haven't, like I'll put myself in the list. I don't want to get emotionally invested to this show that I'm going to fool myself into thinking that it is this animated show, but really it's going to make you go through some stuff. But there's something commendable for the creation of BoJack, so I totally commend it, and I also commend that a new show like that could have easily just rested on its laurels and be like, we have a great sounding cast, and we have some funny skits, and here's some animals doing some raunchy stuff. But they didn't go that way. They're giving you real story.
No, it's definitely a modern classic, and I think it'll hold up. And I think the reason there's it's kind of like a Blade Runner where it's got that, that nice little fan base is because BoJack's very relatable in the sense of, he's not necessarily a good person. Like there are moments he tries to do good or tries to say he's good. And then you find out, well, that doesn't make you a good person. Sometimes you're just bad. And it's not that you're born bad. It's you make a lot of bad choices and you have to live with that. And it tackles those issues of us as modern people. I was like, where do I stop caring about what I want? what everyone else wants, what makes me happy. If it makes me happy and is it bad, should I still do it? And it tackles those issues, and it's a real deep look at us as people in this modern, social media society.
I think that's a great pick, good brother, and it's something that, it's just a modern look, and I think a lot of people will get a lot out of watching BoJack, so check that one out. Now, good brother, we go to the top 4 of our list here on our top 5 animated sitcoms, and at number 2, good brother, I have South Park. Now, again, at the end of the day, there's not much you could say about South Park. You know the greatness of it. You know its impact culturally. But for me, it's a show that, even in its worst times, even in its worst writing, never forgets what it is. It still knows that it's South Park. It still knows that its job and the thing that it's been put onto this pedestal is because it does point the finger at society. It's not a show that's reflected upon society. It shows society's stupidity. And I think if there's one thing you can always give credit to that writing staff is they always know what the pulse of the country is. They always know what people are like. They always do have a good idea of the psychology. Now, I can understand whether or not you've enjoyed all the seasons or necessarily all the arcs, but to me, all-timer, if we're making these Mount Rushmores, if we're making these lists, South Park is without a doubt one of the crown holders when it comes to it. I have South Park at number 2.
No, I agree. And when we do our final kind of ish list, when we fight, I think it will fall number 3, if not number 2, because I agree with you completely. Personally, I don't like the long arcs, but again, the show is still fantastic. It still can't miss. It's still more relevant than ever, and it still tackles a lot of society's issues in a humorous way. So I completely agree with everything you said. I think my bigger issue was I thought BoJack and these other shows were just a little better, and I don't love the arc recently, so it's kind of, well, what have you done for me lately? So that might be part of the issue, but I completely agree. It's a top 3 of all time.
And speaking of top 3, we're in our top 3, good brother. At number 2, what did you have?
I had The Simpsons, and I don't think we're going to go too into The Simpsons because I think we'll do a whole episode of just The Simpsons, the rise, the fall, the memories, why we think it hit what it hit. We'll go through all that because, again, it deserves its own show. To me, it's number 2. Obviously, it's the greatest animation of all time when it comes to adult animation, in animation in general. It's probably one of the best shows of all time. If you made a list of top 5 programs that changed television history, it's on there. It might be number 1 in some lists. Like, we're not selling The Simpsons. We'll do a whole episode about that. But I guess we're going to have to eventually sell why it's your number 1 or my number 2.
And I think the reason why it's my number 1, it's comfort food. It's nostalgia at its peak. It's wholesomeness at its peak. It's also curiosity at its peak. It's humor at its peak. With some of the most talented people in Hollywood today, some of the most powerful people in Hollywood today, started off in The Simpsons. The Simpsons, and like you said, we could do a whole retrospective, and we will. Our favorite episodes, our least favorite episodes, when did the dip happen, why do we still find it as comfort food? But to me, it is a holy grail of film, television, literature, whatever you want to say, pop culture, the medium of entertainment. The Simpsons are just the most integral part of the modern era. So I have The Simpsons at number 1. So if I have The Simpsons at number 1, and you and I had a pretty similar list, that means if you've been paying attention, you know what your number 1 is. Good brother, what is your number 1 pick?
My number 1, to me, I didn't do a safe pick, but obviously when we do a list together, we'll say it now. Simpsons is number 1. I wanted to pick the unsafe pick, and I think the more real answer, even though it's only been a few seasons, is Rick and Morty. And I think you undersold it. I don't think it definitely took inspiration from Futurama, but I think what it did is like, hey, you remember those 10 episodes of Futurama you like? Imagine if we did that every episode. And I think that's what Rick and Morty does. Well, Rick and Morty is the only show on this list where every single episode you have done to this point is an A. At minimum an A-. And that's impressive in 4 seasons. And what it also has done is touch pop culture. And it's connected this Generation Z to the Y, to the X, to the old-timers. Everyone can connect about Rick and Morty because it talks about sci-fi from the 70s to the modern time, or modern-day issues to past issues. And it kind of sticks a middle finger to the audience, at the same time not treating us like we're stupid. And I respect that. And like I said, the writing alone is fantastic. And, we haven't seen a show since the Simpsons touch pop culture where Pringles and Super Bowl commercials and soda cans. And
McDonald's.
all getting this. McDonald's, like, this isn't, like, that's how big this is. And I think to ignore all that or compare it to any of the other shows beside The Simpsons is underselling Rick and Morty. Like, Rick and Morty is a brand. And on top of it only being a brand, again, it hasn't had a bad episode. Like, you can't name another show, maybe ever, that's gone 4 seasons of A material every episode for 25 minutes.
Well, here's where I will just say, and I will correlate it to sports. Rick and Morty is the Patrick Mahomes of animated television. The Simpsons is the Tom Brady. Yeah, there are times where The Simpsons have not been good, but The Simpsons have every accolade that you can ever imagine. Rick and Morty, as well, are getting all the recognition, all its awards, but the thing that's stopping Rick and Morty from being the all-timer is time. That's it. If Rick and Morty goes another 4 years, let's say another 4 seasons, and it keeps its type of run that it has now, then yeah, I mean, it deserves a seat at the table at top 3, top 4, easily, no conversation. But if we're having this type of conversation, I think Rick and Morty is your Patrick Mahomes, The Simpsons and South Park are like your Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady's of, they're just the establishment. They're the guys. And until Rick and Morty has the longevity, it'll grab it. But there's no doubt in my mind that, yeah, this is your Patrick Mahomes. This is your guy. This is the show that if everything stays the way it is, it will have a stranglehold on pop culture. And when it does finally have a series finale, everybody will go crazy for it.
Well, and here's my argument. It's like, yeah, it's Patrick Mahomes, and we're seeing the game being changed. And like I said, I think what the other shows haven't done is caught that Generation Z, where this show has caught every generation. And regardless of longevity, even beside The Simpsons, no one had a perfect 4 seasons to start. And I think that's what you're comparing. It's like, we're not talking about just a really, really hot show coming out. We're talking about like the Breaking Bad of anime, where it's like, they don't have a bad episode.
Okay, but I will say The Simpsons...
super impressive. And Simpsons went like 10 seasons.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. They had 10 seasons.
But we're not arguing that. Like, let's do the list now. Simpsons is number 1.
Yes.
Hands down. Yeah. Like, you can't go 30 seasons like that. Like, it's done. Like, there will never be a show to upstage that. Like, it's just never going to happen. Tom Brady's going to go down and be the best quarterback of all time. This isn't a Michael and LeBron thing. I think this is just Simpsons are number 1.
Yeah.
They're it. But our number 2 is Rick and Morty.
I agree.
Argue any other show on this list beside Rick and Morty, and then South Park at number 3.
Yes, I was going to say, your argument can be for South Park. Because South Park, again, has the longevity and the championships and has the pedestal to stand on. It does have it. But
it depends on a lot of puke humor, where I think that's where it doesn't get the Generation Z.
Sure.
Compared to a Rick and Morty, which it doesn't insult your intelligence, but can be goofy. I think South Park had a stage where it was just goofy to be goofy, and then they found their footing toward the middle seasons. And I still think it's a solid number 3. But again, Rick and Morty's had 4 seasons, so its biggest detriment is also look what they've done in 4 seasons and how big they are in 4 seasons. That's unheard of. Like, The Simpsons didn't even get hot that fast. No other show on this list got us hot that fast. So to now put them at number 2 is like almost like we're not doing our job as pundits.
I think you can make an argument for either one. I will give the run to Rick and Morty simply because it has had an undefeated 4 seasons. Just a run unlike any runs getting to the AFC Championship game. But I think I could kind of take a little guess on this. So we're saying Simpsons 1. We're saying Rick and Morty 2. We're saying South Park 3. We're saying King of the Hill 4. BoJack 5.
Futurama at 4.
Oh.
I don't like it.
Okay.
I get why people do, and you got to show respect.
Sure.
Like I said, I don't hate it. I think it's overrated. But if you look at pop culture-wise, like Futurama, and then I'd say King of the Hill is right under it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where you kind of fall. I think BoJack might have an argument for that 5th spot if you look at how many memes or how many GIFs or how many views. And BoJack was the first it's a Netflix original. So it was the first of these shows to be a binge show. So I think maybe you can have your argument there. But since I love the last 2 with King of the Hill and BoJack, it doesn't bother me to put it 6-5.
Mm-hmm.
But I would definitely say Futurama for, 1, its longevity, because it had the most seasons after our top 3. It definitely is pop culture relevant. Like, you see those, I don't want to live in this world anymore. Just take my money. Look at the $1,000 joke that we're going through now with Trump. And the episode literally had the $300 bill.
Right, the Nixon stuff. So yeah, I agree.
Give them the number 4, not me personally, but I could definitely understand. Like, no, if people know what Futurama is.
That's a really good point. So I think we settle on it then, huh? So Simpsons, Rick and Morty, South Park, Futurama, King of the Hill, BoJack.
Yep.
I love it. That's a great list, and that's a great list for each and every one of you guys to binge watch as we gave you our top 5 animated sitcoms here on the Good Brothers Quarantine Files edition. Good Brother, there's one show that didn't make the list that everybody's going to be talking about when they listen to this. Why isn't Family Guy on either one of our lists?
I love Family Guy, and I think the other show, maybe Beavis and Butthead, could have made the list, but my argument with Beavis and Butthead, it's very more clippy, like a robot chicken, so it's kind of its own thing of why it was funny, and a lot of music videos, so I didn't really count it. It's kind of like the Papa Bear, but it definitely had its issues. My issue with Family Guy is we're at the point now where I understand if people like it, and I still happen to enjoy it, not as much as these other shows, but I do enjoy Family Guy. It's very offensive to be offensive, and it doesn't do it in a smart way like South Park does. It does it in a very, like, we're trying to make you feel as icky as you can. And that's kind of Seth MacFarlane's thing. And I understand why society-wise people still enjoy it. And it's very, it's cheap humor. It's you know, pie-in-the-face humor. It's kick-in-the-balls humor where you don't have to think too much of it. I like its first half run a lot. I thought that would have, its first half would be top 3. But the problem is their modern half is so out there and it's just so different. And it went from a normal sitcom to kind of its own clip show in 30 minutes, but it's a 30-minute version, so it drags a bit. And then they do a lot of themed episodes now, which I understood they had to keep that audience. But in doing so, I think you lost a lot of the diehards in the beginning. And to me, the modern season kind of drops it from a top 3 to a top 8.
I think Family Guy for me is the same thing as Drawn Together. While I might enjoy it, and there may be times where it's something that, like, yeah, it makes me laugh out loud and rolling on the floor, it's not a show that I could be like universally, yeah, it's a top tier. Like, you could get something out of it. Like, it's like candy. It's just like candy, or like they're delicious, they're sweet, but they're not necessarily good for you, and you're not gonna get a whole lot of nutrition out of it. But like, those are the type of shows that it's just different. They're different type of levels to this thing, and I think that's you really saw it on this list. But Good Brother, I had a lot of fun with this one.
Yeah, no, this was a fun one, and these were shows that we grew up on watching at 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock or on Sunday night. The Sunday night lineup was always fun with King of the Hill, Futurama, The Simpsons, and then that other show like they were trying to push, like a Malcolm in the Middle, like that 70s show, like their live action that they were like, okay, we're going to push this until we move it to a Tuesday.
Oh, you know, it's interesting. And now that we've kind of gone through this list, and in our last episode, we did the top sitcoms, where would a show like Malcolm in the Middle fall?
I think those are more like, and that 70s show are like personal favorites.
Okay.
And obviously we work in this field now, and we have to watch a lot of things for the job. And I think we can kind of separate what we loved as kids and what we're like, okay, that show maybe didn't have the popularity. It doesn't really hold up. I personally love Malcolm in the Middle. I think it's very underrated, very hilarious. It would make a top 10 for me. And we talked all sitcoms. So we're talking a span from the 70s. So, like, for a show like that, to me, top 10, I think, is very impressive. Same with that 70s show. Those are my personal top 10, but they definitely wouldn't make a top 5 of all time. Like, there's a lot of shows that we didn't even talk about that would make a top 10 list compared to a top 5.
And finally, where would The Simpsons have fallen if we had allowed it into our first episode's list? Would it be top 5 on either?
My personal list?
Yeah.
3.
So it would have made the list.
Both my number ones. It would have been Rick and Morty, The Office, The Simpsons.
So it definitely would have had a chance. So you would have had 2 animated on your list.
Honestly, it would have been the number 1. It would have been the number 1 again. I think if we did this list all together, it probably would have been The Simpsons, then Friends, then probably The Office, South Park, Rick and Morty. Like, think about a show like Rick and Morty would probably drop to number 5.
Yeah, and that's why I asked. Like, that is the interesting dynamic if you were to put these 2 lists now together.
No, yeah, it'd be real close, but then it comes down to The Simpsons or The Friends. And I think you got to give it just a little bit to The Simpsons because the 30-year span, at that point, you're like, okay, who's been on longer? Okay, The Simpsons wins.
Well, good brother, I cannot wait to see what list you have for us next time here on the Good Brothers Quarantine Files. But until then, you guys can follow us all over social media. The Good Brother is on Twitter at Mercado21 Alex.
Don't follow me.
And on Instagram at Mercado2121. I'm on Twitter at Mike and Media and on Instagram at Mike Mercado Media. You can also like us on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. This show has a Twitter handle. It's at Good Brothers Pod. And you can follow the network at Mercado Airwaves. And if you're feeling generous, follow Nicole Mancha everywhere in the universe at Typing When Tipsy. Good brother, that's another episode of the Quarantine Files. What do you got planned as you are locked down here in the city of Chicago?
I'm going to keep coming up with these show ideas. And what I'm thinking, we're going to do themed weeks. So we're going to try to stick with the 30 minutes outline. Now we're not really going to touch our dramas or movies just yet. This week will be strictly 30-minute, and I think a little hint, we are going to keep on the animated route for next episode.
Ooh, and for anybody who follows me on social media, anytime you say animated and 30 minutes, there's always a good chance that Batman could be involved. But who knows? We'll find out in the next episode of the Quarantine Files. For the good brother himself, Alex Mercado.
Adios.
I'm the good brother, Mike Mercado. Thank you guys so much for joining us on this episode of the Quarantine Files here on the Good Brothers on the Mercado Airwaves
Network.
Be safe, everybody. Good job, homie.
Hey guys, Mike here from Mercado Airwaves. We want to thank you so much for all the support you've given us here on the network. And if you want to see what we're up to outside of the station, please follow us all over social media. I'm on Twitter at Mike M Media and on Instagram at Mike Mercado Media. You can follow the good brother Alex Mercado on Twitter at Mercado21 Alex and on Instagram at Mercado2121. The lovely Nicole Mancha is on all social media platforms at Typing When Tipsy. You can follow the network on Twitter at Mercado Airwaves. Our pop culture show, The Good Brothers, on Twitter at Good Brothers Pod. Our true crime shows on Instagram at Murder, Mysteries, and More. And of course, like us on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. You can see all our videos on YouTube.com/Mike Mercado 2333 or by searching Mercado Airwaves Network. We play video games on Twitch, twitch.tv/Mercado Airwaves Network. And of course, you can support our network by finding a tier just for you, whether you want early access, you want to be part of polls, you want to win contest prizes, by visiting us at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. And we really appreciate it wherever you get your favorite podcast to like, rate, review, and share us. And please spread the word. For the good brother, Alex Mercado, for the lovely Nicole Mancha, I'm Mike Mercado. Thank you so much for all the support you've given us here on the network.